Welcome to Fireside Giants. My name is Alex with my co-host here, Anthony Rivardo, coming back at you with another Giants video, of course, my friends. Hope you had a great weekend, and today we're here to talk about Nate Solder and his impact on this offensive line during this upcoming 2021 season, anticipations for what he will do, his influence. He had some pretty great things to say about the team a couple weeks ago, and was positive. He was like, I'm really here to be a helpful person in a helpful role, and I'm not going to be gunning for anybody's position. I'm going to be working hard, trying to earn my way back onto this team. But Nate Solder traditionally is just a fantastic human being. We know his story. His son's been dealing with cancer. He's been doing football and trying to get his son healthy for the past couple of years. So, best of luck in his continued fight for full health. But, at the end of the day, NFL is a business. They have to be looking at Nate Solder as a potential cap casualty, and that's why they reduced his salary so much this upcoming, this offseason. And we'll talk about that in addition to what his impact will probably be this upcoming year. But Anthony, before we dive into Nate Solder and everything that revolves around him, how are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing real good. I spent yesterday celebrating my mom's birthday. Happy birthday to my mom. I know she watches us. And then, of course, I also watched Italy win the European Championship. I thought that was pretty awesome. I'm Italian, as many of you could probably assume, and I'm pretty excited to see them get that big victory. What an exciting game that was as well. I watched the entire thing. I was on the edge of my seat for the majority of it. I actually usually find soccer games to be pretty boring. I didn't find that one boring at all. I thought it was a super entertaining game from start to it was excellent from start to finish. It was so good, and then the penalty shootout was a real thrill. And shout out Italy, big victory. And of course, now we'll get into talking about some Giants football, talking about Nate Solder and this offensive line, which is going to be the biggest question mark of the season for the Giants, this offensive line. And Nate Solder poses a couple of questions for the offensive line itself. So I'm excited to get into that, talk about Nate Solder, the offensive line, and what exactly is going to happen there leading into the 2021 NFL season.
Well, this offensive line has a lot of question marks. We know this. We've discussed it. We know that Matt Peart is coming back from COVID last season. He's expected to be that starting right tackle. Andrew Thomas has been working with Azeez Ojulari, Evan Ingram, and Darius Slayton down in Georgia. And that's a really good sign to me. The one thing that this offseason that's really proved to me is that these players are friends. They love to hang out with each other. They like spending time together. They like working out and training together, developing that chemistry. And that, in my opinion, means everything, right? Azeez Ojulari, I'm sure, is working with Andrew Thomas, going up against him, learning different techniques, gauging his experience from this past year. And, of course, working with some of the veterans like Evan Ingram and Slayton is also helpful. So I think they're going to benefit tremendously from just working together. And I don't think I've seen this type of chemistry and relationships within the Giants organization in quite some time. I don't know if you can recall the last time the Giants were spending this much time together in a positive way. The last time this kind of happened, it was the boat trip, and that was a big negative. The Giants are spending a lot of positives, time together, and I think it's going to translate to the regular season, or at least we hope so. But that work ethic that they're showing is huge to me. And I think that shows a lot of young leadership that we didn't have before. A lot of times it was Logan Ryan bringing guys together. It was veterans really coming in, trying to build that chemistry, build that communication. And now you see the younger guys doing it. That stands out to me. I think that's a really big sign. Now, I haven't seen Nate Solder, and that's not a bad thing. I'm not blaming him for that. I know he's very preoccupied with everything going on in his life. But he's coming back this year, and essentially, what is the value that he brings to this team, right? In my opinion, every good team has a solid swing tackle that can play left and right tackle. And I think that is where Nate Solder is going to fit. That is going to be his mold this upcoming year. He's counting $13.5 million in dead money. His cap hit is about $9.5 million, down tremendously. I think it was $16 million before that, or something around that number. His guaranteed salary is only $3 million. So, when you're looking at him, he's an expensive swing tackle, but a valuable one, because the Giants, sometimes you can't trust those rookies to take that big step forward. I know Andrew Thomas, we expect him to do that, and I think he will. Matt Peart, he didn't have that many snaps last year. We obviously think he has all the talent in the world based on his tangible traits, the massive size. He's like the mountain from Game of Thrones. But does that translate to good pass blocking? Not always. And that is why you have a good swing tackle like Nate Solder to come in and supplement deficiencies if need be, Anthony. What do you think about Nate Solder, and do you think that he will end up getting starting snaps? Do you think there will actually be a position battle at right tackle? Or are they just going to kind of assume that Matt Peart is going to win that?
I think there's going to be a position battle at right tackle. Personally, I'm going to assume that Matt Peart is going to win that battle. I'm very high on Matt Peart, as many of you know. But I do think there's going to be a battle between Matt Peart and Nate Solder, and may the best man win. Whoever's best for the job is who I want out there. I just think that's going to be Matt Peart. In terms of, what Nate Solder's role will be with the Giants if he is around, swing tackle, of course, playing right tackle and left tackle. He played left tackle for the majority of his career, right tackle as a rookie, and it seems like he's probably going to be right tackle this season if he is on the roster. But, of course, also playing that jumbo tight end role, when you have 6 offensive linemen on the field, goal line packages or 3rd and short, 4th and short, that kind of idea. That's where I think Nate Solder makes his biggest impact, just being another additional average offensive lineman to have on the field when you want 6 linemen on the field. I mean, that can be pretty important. That could be super valuable for a team if they're trying to run, a lot of heavy personnel packages. I mean, even you can get creative and put, we saw Shane Lemieux, I think, play some snaps at fullback. Maybe you go ahead and put him at fullback and you move the offensive line around to some degree to where you have Nate Solder, Shane Lemieux, and the other 4 guys on the field at the same time. You can get really creative and just put a ton of offensive linemen out on the field for some of these snaps. And, Nate Solder being on the field as an additional player is probably pretty good, because if we're talking about him being good enough to be out there as a starting player, then having him as a reserve role is obviously good enough, I mean, not to say that could be an indictment of the Giants' offensive line talent as a whole, which it absolutely is, but still, just to have Nate Solder as your swing tackle or your jumbo tight end in some scenarios could be really beneficial to the Giants' offense in short yard situations. And personally, that's where I see him making the biggest impact this upcoming season. That's if he makes the final 53 or 55 man roster, whatever it is this season, because there is a discussion to be had as to Nate Solder's contract and what to do with that, because it feels like the Giants are absolutely stuck with Nate Solder right now, and there's no real reason to have him on the team other than the fact that his contract forces him to be on the team. But, if you do take a look at it, post-June, there is a way to move on from Nate Solder and free up some cap space, though that might be a little bit tricky because it's going to require finding a substantial trade partner, and I don't know if the Giants are going to be able to find one for Nate Solder, but it is possible. That is in the realm of possibilities to throw out there, that there is a chance that the Giants could move on from Nate Solder this offseason, though I think ultimately he ends up becoming a swing tackle or a jumbo tight end in those extra offensive lineman sets.
And that's an interesting, concept to think about, because they're trying to use all these players to their strengths. They're trying to maximize everybody, especially when you're making that much money, like Nate Solder is. You can't just have him sitting around doing nothing, right? You got to find ways to apply him, and I think that might be interesting to use him in those like heavy personnel if they're running just heavy, and having him as an extra tight end, more or less. On the outside, that could be something to think about when you're using maybe like those goal line stands, using him as an extra blocker, like you mentioned with Shane Lemieux as a fullback. That could be interesting because Nate Solder is a big guy, 6'8". Dating back to 2019, looking at his numbers, overall he wasn't the worst in the world. He just had 2 really, really bad games. And it was week 3 against Tampa Bay, that game that DJ won. That was his first win. And then you have the game against Detroit in week 8. Those 2 games represented like 50% of his deficiency that year. Yeah, he gave up 5 sacks during those games out of 11 that entire season, right? So 5 sacks came in 2 games out of all of the entire season he played. And he gave up 8 pressures in that week 3 game against Tampa Bay and 7 against Detroit. Those were both of his highs that year. So when you're looking at him, he's a relatively consistent player with just a few duds that show up every now and then. And it's not like Detroit had any exponential pass rushers, or just any above average guys that really took over the game. I mean, they had Shaquille Barrett against Tampa, which is obviously, and JPP, which is why, he struggled. But Detroit, like Devin Kennard, maybe they don't really have that many good pass rushers. So that was interesting that he had a really hard time during that game. But for the most part, the rest of his contests were pretty adequate. He had a couple games where he gave up a sack, but his pass blocking is his biggest strength, right? He's not a great run blocker. He's a better pass blocker. And Matt Peart is the exact opposite of that. He's a really good run blocker with his size, but he has a lot to work on with his pass blocking, Anthony. So this could be an interesting portion to think about when we're trying to determine who really is going to be that starting right tackle. Are the Giants going with more of a heavy run set? or are they going with heavy passing? Now, the personnel this year would indicate that they're probably going to be a little bit more passing oriented, based on the fact that they went out and got Kadarius Toney, John Ross, and Kenny Galladay. Adding 3 big receivers for Daniel Jones would kind of tell us they're going to lean more on the passing game rather than relying on the running game like they did last year with Wayne Gallman and when Saquon went down. But that was mainly because they didn't have any receivers that could gain separation and yards after catch. So I personally view this offense as kind of being more balanced instead of one-sided, more run and then pass. I think it's going to be pretty balanced. Early downs are going to run the football. It's going to be kind of predictable, but they're going to have really good blockers in the run game, which is going to open things up, especially on that right side with Will Hernandez moving to right guard, and then you have Matt Peart or Nate Solder at right tackle, who are big guys. So, and I think Evan Ingram's also improved as a run blocker, and of course you have Kyle Rudolph, who also is a decent enough run blocker. So I think that it's going to be pretty balanced. We're going to see a lot of play action, which is what Eli Manning used to thrive on back in the day. I think they're going to kind of rely on play action with Daniel Jones, open up that running game. Every day I've been posting running clips of Daniel Jones. I've been kind of just combing through, the game time, the game pass for the NFL. And every week I kind of find a couple runs and I'm like, I totally forgot about that run. There was one I saw against Washington yesterday. He completely faked out the entire camera crew. Like they have Devonta Freeman in the backfield on his ass, and Daniel Jones is running 50 yards up the sideline. And I'm like, we got to do more of that, right? When you have Saquon Barkley, all these weapons in the secondary, it forces players to come out of the box, and it allows that read option to be even more effective. And I think that, getting those big, fast blockers out in front of you, and I think Matt Peart probably is a little bit more, refined in that area, a little bit more athletic, a little bit more spry with those young legs to really go out and get ahead of those blockers, or rather those tacklers, and get to the second level. So, Anthony, when you're looking at this group and the personnel, if they want to go more pass heavy, Nate Solder could be a better fit based on his past performances being a better pass blocker. But if they want to be more balanced, maybe roll with Matt Peart. He's a better run blocker and potential as a pass blocker. What do you see Matt Peart's biggest weaknesses being? Because that is going to be what determines who the starter is going to be this upcoming year.
Yeah, my evaluation of Matt Peart is a little bit different because I'm still going based off of the college film. I think, his 150 snaps in the NFL are just kind of something to take into consideration, but I'm looking back at his college film, and I always thought of him to be a better pass protector than he was a run blocker, and the reason why is because he does have a lack of strength. If you do look at him, of course, his arms are super long, and he is this mountain of a man, but he used to be, at least in college, we've talked about this before, it looks like he's added a lot of muscle and strength, but he used to be kind of slender, a little bit skinnier than you would expect an offensive tackle in the NFL to be, and he did struggle at times in college with his strength. And that was going up against a competition at UConn that he was struggling with his strength. So that was my biggest concern for him going to the NFL. Is he strong enough to hold on to defenders long enough? Is he strong enough to hold these blocks and to make this significant push in the running game? That was always my question. It seemed like he got a little bit bigger once he got to the league, and his run blocking did improve in those games that we saw. And it seems like he's once again gotten even more muscular this past offseason, and it looks like he's actually going to be a real mountain this upcoming season, as Alex likes to refer to him, because he does look jacked right now, and it looks like he might have fixed that strength problem that he had in college. So now I think it's just combining that along with the great feet that he's always had, because he's always had really quick, nimble feet, and that was the number one thing that jumped off of his collegiate tape to me back when I watched him. He was so quick, his kick step was perfect, and he was able to just mirror edge rushers on the edge, just pass rushers on the edge, able to just mirror them with quick feet and really good technique, especially with his lower half. His technique was really good. And I even think that his hand placement, his hand technique was pretty good too. He just lacked this fundamental strength all around, and it showed up in the passing game, in the running game at times too. So that was my biggest concern for Matt Peart going into this upcoming season. But it seems like he has gotten a lot stronger, so that might be alleviated by that. So I think that when you look at him, he could be your really good all-around offensive tackle now. I think that if he did add this strength that we think he did, he can be a really good all-around offensive tackle. And rather than just picking your poison, do you want a better pass protector or run blocker, I think him being that all-around guy kind of just makes him the standalone choice as your right tackle this upcoming season, as long as he proves it that way in training camp and in preseason. Nate Solder, sure, he might be a better career pass protector, and he also might have a lot of struggles in the running game, but he's also had a fair amount of struggles in the passing game the last time we saw him. You kind of just mentioned he had some horrible performances the last time we saw him on the field, And that's kind of a struggle. When you look at it, how do you trust this guy who had these really horrible performances in his last full season of football, takes a whole year off of football? I respect his reasons why, but still, he missed an entire year of football. Now he's going to come back. Do we expect him to bounce back to a form that was greater than the one that he was in 2019? Do we expect him to go back to 2015 playing, performance? No, I really don't expect that to be the case. So I'm just a little bit confused with the whole Nate Solder, diagram, what exactly he can bring to the offense, because I just think that the potential is so much higher with a guy like Matt Peart. Maybe you can argue the floor is a little bit higher with a guy like Nate Solder, but I don't think so. I think the floor is pretty low as well, considering he took this past year off of football. So I'm personally all in on Matt Peart this year, taking all my chips and just pushing them towards Matt Peart, saying that that's my guy. And I've pretty much explained my whole breakdown on why I believe in him and what I've seen from him that are his strengths and weaknesses, and why I think his biggest weakness will not be as big of a deal as it would have been last season. I really thought we saw a lot of great things in those 150 snaps that we saw from him in his rookie year. I think we saw good moments as a pass protector. I think we did see him improve quite a bit as a run blocker compared to what he was in college. So just taking all that into consideration, plus this offseason of gaining strength and muscle and practicing with the team, this is Matt Peart's year, in my opinion. I think he's going to break out and be our starting right tackle, and I think he's going to be a damn good one at that.
I agree. It's all about strength for him, but also, as you mentioned, the quick feet in pass blocking sets. My last point until we wrap this episode is essentially Matt Peart is going to benefit, just as Andrew Thomas and the rest of this offensive line will, from the establishment of consistent coaching with Rob Sale and Pat Flaherty, and having a full season, off season really, of in-person training, right? That training camp, extra game, a full preseason, that is going to set him up for success. He was a good run blocker last year with nothing to work off of, right? With no body of work preseason. He didn't have any games to get acclimated to the NFL with. He didn't have any really training camp to really get his feet wet. And he was already competing, for a starting right tackle spot with Cam Fleming. He was never really given an opportunity. Nobody expected him to even have any reps at all. So I think for the most part, they're finally putting the offensive lineman in a position to succeed, and mainly because of COVID last year really had an impact on this. But I think Matt Peart is in a position where he can really get this starting job and really make that big developmental step forward, that leap that we need him to experience, that we can feel good about the right tackle position, at least in run blocking. I will take above average run blocker and average pass blocker next year for Matt Peart in a heartbeat. That would be, in perfect world, he's an average pass blocker and great run blocker. In my opinion, that is all I'm hoping for. Because expecting him to be like an all-pro guy is just way out there. It's way too optimistic. But an above-average run blocker, which I think he can be with his size and speed, and then an average pass blocker would be tremendous for the Giants. That would be everything. Because Daniel Jones, with hopefully better pocket awareness and being at his vision side, will be able to, kind of, I guess, adjust in post-snap, depending on how Matt Peart is performing there. Average means that sometimes you lose, sometimes you win. So Daniel Jones being on the vision side will be helpful. Of course, Andrew Thomas is really the big question mark here. If he takes that step forward on the blind side, Daniel Jones is going to have a lot of time. Interior guard is not as nearly as important as offensive tackle, so those two spots are the most prioritized in terms of we need to see developmental jumps now, not later. So, guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode talking about Nate Solder, his impact, and there is a possibility that Nate Solder does get cut. He is making a ton of freaking money to be a potential swing tackle, maybe too much money. So I'd rather have Cam Fleming for cheaper, and that way we can go out and sign and have a little bit of extra cash in case injuries occur. Now, the Giants could wait and say, okay, if injuries occur, we can always cut Nate Solder and use that money elsewhere. So there is that possibility. It's going to be interesting to see, but I think they feel good about him because, not only is he a great human being and they respect that, and they're very loyal to their players, the Giants, but at the same time, having a great swing tackle is a huge benefit because injuries do happen. You never know what's going to happen in the NFL level, and putting in a starter after, as a reserve guy is huge, and it's going to be huge for Daniel Jones. They need to protect Daniel Jones, and if it means overpaying a swing tackle, so be it. So that's kind of my opinion on this, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video talking about a couple different players here and the impact of this offensive line moving forward. Of course, we'll have another episode for you out tomorrow. Training camp is coming up, my friends. I'm hyped, excited. I can't wait to see everybody on the field and see some videos and get you guys some more awesome content. As always, make sure you have a fantastic day. Subscribe below on YouTube. Notifications on Apple and Spotify, and we'll catch you guys on the next one.